steal socials for TikTok and YouTube. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi, my name is Brianna. I am the head editor of Player One magazine, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
I'm Lainey. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm part of the writing and multimedia departments for Player One.
Hi, I'm Jack. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the head of the multimedia department.
Hi, my name is Logan. I use the they or she series of pronouns, and I am the head of the visual and marketing departments at Player One.
Hi, I'm Anna. I use she, her, hers, and I'm the head of the writing department at Player One.
Thank you and welcome everybody. And so we're going to first start with questions that revolve around LGBT characters and creators of video games because of Pride Month. So, are there any popular games that feature a character that is LGBT? If not, is this like a stigma around like who plays video games and who is like getting this content? And if so, can you describe the game and if you've played it?
I mean, last year, Last of Us Part 2, which was like one of the biggest games that came out all year, the main playable character was a lesbian.
I think they should be terrified of me.
And it was like a pretty big deal because it hadn't really happened that much in like a massive, huge budget game that was like the big release of the year. I was like, there was a lot of like hate on the internet about it that was really surprising and like disturbing. But the game I thought like made it, you know, it was like organic. It was good. It like felt like a good depiction, at least to me, which like I'm not like the the boss of how that's a good depiction. But I don't know, especially it being a sequel to a game where you play as like, which I love the first game, but where you play as like a 50-year-old man guiding a girl across the country. It's pretty different, I guess. But it's also not. The game is pretty similar to the first game. So I thought it was cool that that was the direction they took it with the main character.
I think another like huge a huge game, but it was an indie game that won like indie game of the year last year, I think, is Hades. The main character Zagreus is canonically bisexual. The one of like the side quests you do is oh my gosh, it's literally Greek mythology fan fiction, guys. Like, why lie? Why lie? It's about reuniting Achilles and Patroclus. Like, it's like about, I don't know, because the romance aspect of the game isn't necessarily a feature of it that's made super apparent. You get to it by leveling up your relationships with characters who in turn give you items and aid. And so you kind of start to discover like their past or like their like past relationships or like the relationships you can develop with them, which I really liked. I thought it was cool. And I also think it's because I love the characters in that game, the characterization of these like Greek like mythological characters in like this setting where like you're trying to escape the underworld, but also like they have very real and vibrant personalities. So I thought that was good. That was interesting. This magazine would not be here, respectfully, if Hades was not a game. Like that is the origin story of this magazine.
Still have yet to play Hades, but definitely feel that like Clementine like is also canonically bisexual. And with that one, it was kind of like you couldn't romance like the two male or female romance options there. And I feel like that was like an opportunity for like mean gatekeepy players that like we make the magazine to keep out. It's those kind of players who are like, well, I didn't make my Clementine kiss the girl, so she isn't bisexual. And just like things like that, still very apparent in video games. And like Fire Emblem, there'll be like bisexual romance options. And it's like, well, if I played as like the male main character and married and S-ranked, if you will, the female bisexual option, she isn't bisexual.
There's also like Fire Emblem also has like a weird thing where they love to like very strongly allude to the fact that a character or a character's relationships are very not straight. Like off the top of my head, like Annette and Mercedes, like you can get like paired endings with characters depending on how you level their relationships with one another, which is like a huge part of the combat of the game, but also it's just fun to watch their like support videos. Their like paired ending, I'm sorry. Like if you read it and you're like, "Oh, they're just girlies, just the girls hanging out." I'm
Just
like
besties, bestie vibes only.
I was like, "What?" They like go off and like, you know, do their own jobs as working in charity and then come together and live together the rest of their lives and die together. And I'm like, okay, just say they're dating. Just say they're married. Like I don't understand why we're afraid of that.
On that same thread, I have not gotten to this part, but I know about Caspar and Linhart's paired ending. That's not just friends, guys. That's literally not just friends.
Off the top of your head, do you remember what the context of their paired ending was?
Wasn't okay, off the dome. Isn't it Caspar is like, do you want to just travel the world together? And Linhart is like, yeah. Linhart is also canonically bisexual. So
And you know what? They do. They travel the world together. And so you can have like paired endings with like canonically bisexual characters and just like a very like, I guess like straight coded character like Caspar, who's just like very beefy, very manly.
He is
And then
not a
like
thought, not a
Dang.
single thought.
0% very, and like at the same time, like he'll have paired endings with women and like he just has a bunch of kids with them. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, what are the implications of that there?
So you guys mentioned like a lot of different games, and one of them you said was an indie game. So my next question is there most like a certain type of video game, like a first person shooter, zombie stealth, horror, life simulation, is like a certain genre more prone to having LGBT characters, and or is one of like the big companies more prone to have LGBT characters like Blizzard, Activision, Annapurna, Nintendo, the indie companies, like who's more likely to feature these characters?
I think indie developers usually are because first of all, there are so many indie developers. And one thing about the indie genre that makes it so alluring is that oftentimes they will shed light on these smaller, more intimate stories that we often don't get to see. Um, Meanwhile, with like, I know that Nintendo kind of has like an issue with it where they'll just chalk it up to like, oh, an error in translation if like a character's pronouns change from like she, her to he, him when going from English to Japanese. Um, and or there's some stuff that they'll omit from the English translation entirely. I think in one of the Pokemon games actually, there's like this whole there's this sorry, trying to find the words, but there's this one trainer that you just you battle at some point, and there is a line in the Japanese version that explicitly states that she's a trans woman, and then in English it's just like not really there. um and part of that is also because I feel like especially a company like Nintendo, they want to put on this whole like, oh, family friendly face, and even though it shouldn't really be this controversial thing in America, it still is. And they don't want to risk being part of that controversy. But yeah, I think that indie developers are definitely, they don't have as big of a risk when it comes to that, because they usually don't really have such a widespread fan base. And they're also more likely to like talk about their own experiences and just stuff that isn't really seen as often.
I also think that the indie scene for games and like indie creators too, because they're very much like small teams, and the games are like very personal to them. Like I think about like two of my favorite games. One of them is called If Found, and it's about a like trans woman in Ireland, and it's just like about like it's like a visual novel, kind of about like finding herself and all this good stuff, and it's beautiful. Like I think I sent Anna pictures and I was like, you have to play this game. And I was like, just like sobbing, like horribly sobbing at the end of it. But another game that I really think is like kind of like the pinnacle of like LGBT representation in indie gaming is Celeste. It's a platformer where you play as Madeline, who is trying to climb a mountain, and it's in a lot of ways it's a game about like mental illness and depression. But Maddie Thorenson, the creator of the game, wrote this like really beautiful article. I don't know, Jack, what would you call it? Like an
Like an
essay?
essay kind of. And the game had like a little free DLC that came out too that kind of like got more into the story, like kind of being a trans story, because Maddie said themselves that like they didn't really realize that it was like a trans story until reflecting on themselves. And like it's a really good essay or article or whatever. But so the game, they added like this free DLC level that kind of adds some story and gets into that too.
Yeah, I feel like that's like kind of when a lot of people think of the like main, I feel like main LGBT like representation in games. I feel like Celeste is kind of like a big one. And yeah, the whole story with like Maddie Thorenson and like what they kind of added to the game even after they created it. Like also they're just amazing. Like that team of developers is like so talented. So it's a really cool game.
Yeah, and like indie definitely is like within the name, they're independent. They don't really like belong to anybody, so they can kind of do what they want. Whereas like, especially what I think Lainey was saying within like localization stuff, like Nintendo will do a lot of very like questionable things like before a game comes over to the West, or if there is a worldwide release, people will notice that something is different, something's just a bit off there, and definitely to like to maintain this persona that they think that they need to keep after all these years.
It's an issue like in just in general. I mean, specifically in my experience playing Japanese games, they have like a whole host of issues on like terms of like accessibility and like button mapping and stuff like that. But like queer stories and stuff, like I feel like that's just a global issue. That's not necessarily like I'm sure that there's like there's probably indie develop there's so many indie games. Like that's the thing, is that there are so many games that are made that just like that's like part of a huge part of the gaming community is indie games. But I think like big, like I don't know, what are they called, AAA games?
Yeah, AAAs are
Like
usually most likely.
AAA games, like usually I feel like is Last of Us Part 2 a AAA game? I feel like that's like kind of like an outlier in that sense, where it definitely, yeah, a lot of AAA games kind of tend to stay away from discussions of like really pertinent issues.
Okay, so with like The Last of Us Part 2, I didn't really see as much criticism for Ellie being a lesbian. What I saw more of was there was this character, Abby. And when people first saw Abby's design, they thought that I isn't she actually
They thought,
cisgender, but like
because she
people
is,
thought that
she's
she was
literally,
Wait.
yeah, like she's jacked. Like
Yeah, she
she's
survives
ripped.
in the zombie
that's what I
apocalypse.
saw most of like the hate online about. And I think another thing is also just like the typical audience of AAA games. Because you know there is like the connotations that those and like, you know, like competitive shooters and stuff are more associated with like kind of like the stereotypical like gamer bro fan base. um like, you know, whether or not that's true, that's just kind of the implications that some of those games carry. um because for a while, like, so much of it was just marketed towards straight men, and that's who I saw most of the people complaining about Abby online. And it's just like, okay, like, does it really matter that, you know, even if she was trans, like, does it matter? And the fact that she's not, it's like, who are you to just kind of really assume that? Not only just assume it, but then proceed to attack it when like you're not even correct.
Yeah, and a big thing in that too that was for a lot of, I'm not gonna like go deep into spoilers because I guess it's only a year old game, but Abby's storyline hinges on a trans character actually. Like the whole thing is her I can't believe I'm Lev, this kid Lev, who is a trans boy. They're like 12. He's like 12 years old. The whole thing is like you being like in this weird cult, raised as a girl and shaved his head and then got banished, and that's like his whole story, and that's kind of like what connects Abby to him and how like Abby develops. And I thought that was cool that they did that in the game, like as a story, but that was like a big thing that like neckbeards on the internet were complaining about. But another cool thing that recently I saw was like, because I associate like Japanese games getting localized and coming here and like having weird like suggestions of queer characters, but they're not being anything. Is the recent re-release of Near Replicant that came out in April here. And that's a game from 2010 that within America back then was Near Gestalt, and it was kind of like a weird release in America. They like changed the main character from like a teenaged boy to like a 60-year-old man for some reason. And like I don't know, it's awesome. It came out recently back in America, and I don't want to get into like huge spoilers for it. And I'm not going to explain all the weird lore because that would take like 90 hours and I don't understand it. But the two like party it's hard to say like she's they suggest that she's trans a lot of the time in the game, especially when you get into her backstory. But it's like a complicated like robot human thing. Nier is really there's a lot of
Nier is weird.
Yeah, Nier is
Nier's
out
weird.
there.
Also, what I think I find a lot of video games do is they'll kind of dance around like gender and like gender identity with like characters who are humanoids, where they're like not quite like they're either part robot or like something like that. Is I can't like think off of any examples, but that's like something where I'll be like playing something and be like, yeah, like yeah. It's not always the robots, but sometimes it is.
Going back to kind of like the whole thing about like localization in Japan, it kind of reminds me of there's this one series called Danganronpa, which a lot of people criticize the writing for, understandably so. I enjoy the games, but it has a lot of flaws. And one of them is how they portray this certain character. I'm just gonna summarize it, but like, fair warning, it is kind of a spoiler. Like, do you guys mind if I talk about it? If it does?
I
Go
don't
ahead.
mind.
So yeah, basically, how it works is, there's like a murder in each chapter, and you have to find who solved the murder. And in the first game, in the second chapter, the murder is this character that the player assumes is a girl named Chihiro. It's then revealed during the trial that Chihiro he's actually a boy, and he just he always kind of looked a bit feminine, and then like for his own sake and protection so that he wouldn't be bullied for being effeminate, just straight up pretended to be a girl. And there's more details to it, but a big thing that's debated among Western fans is that story like transphobic against trans women. And it's not really my place to say because I'm cisgender. But then another thing that's often brought up is like, we are looking at this Eastern narrative through a Western lens, because apparently it's supposed to be a commentary on like toxic masculinity in Japan, and there is like some whole other like cultural context to Chihiro's identity that isn't really explored. But yeah, even if it's not really lost in translation per se or altered in any way, it's just still something that doesn't necessarily translate to the audience's minds, and that just kind of leads to further complications.
So all these games that you have mentioned, are they just through like a variety of genres, or are we doing like more story-based kind of things? Like, where do you see the most representation?
I feel like it's easier. I don't know. I feel like it's easier to discern if a character is queer if it's just like a story-based game, because you actually get to know the characters you're around. Oh, isn't Life is Strange? I feel like we didn't bring up Life is Strange. I feel like that's a big one too.
I was going to. Yeah, it definitely feels like story-based games where you can like especially like make choices
Mm-hmm.
like Life is Strange. This game's like so old now, so I have no problem spoiling it. So like there's a time traveling element, and like the biggest thing is that like the main character can either like save her whole town or this one person because of like the butterfly effect and things of that nature. And it's like her best friend who she's ultimately in love with, and if you do decide to sacrifice her, there's just like this one beautiful moment where they get to kiss and then she dies, and it's that whole thing. So it
I
definitely
have like goosebumps right now.
it,
It's so
very
sad.
chilling, very chilling. Definitely like story based and choice based games do I feel like have more of that, but I feel like it also leads to like this whole like player sexual argument, which just like isn't a thing.
Hmm. I also think that like especially like games like Hades, where the story is kind of secondary to the actual like the combat of the game is like the main thing. Like I think that's something that's starting to happen, and I think will happen more because what I like to remind myself is that these games take years to make, like years and years of development time. So they're constantly playing catch up with like what is suddenly becoming more and more acceptable to portray in like mainstream and things that can be popular, because you have to think also, right? Like they need to make money to keep making games, and sure they can crowdfund like maybe one game, but if you keep constantly asking for money, like who's going to do that every time? So it's like we're constantly kind of playing catch up. So I think that like in the next couple of years, there's going to be a lot more like queer characters and queer representation because just like of steps that are being made like as a not just as a country but kind of like as like a social in like the social climate of everywhere, not everywhere but like in a lot of places. I think it's just going to keep compounding.
Excellent. And we've been talking a lot about video games that have LGBT characters or allude to them in some cases. Can you think of any game that seems to have an inherent bias against them or a fan base that is so like just against it where we're probably not going to see one in that game?
Um, well, I think a lot of with a lot more like shooters and stuff, even if they do ever get like, you know, a like a canonically LGBT plus character, um, so much of like those fan bases, especially like in the competitive scene, because you will go into a lobby and like you will hear slurs. And unfortunately, that's just like so normalized in those fan bases. And people give the excuse of like, oh, well, like they're middle schoolers or something. And like, okay, when I was 11, I was dumb and edgy, but like I wouldn't go out of my way to like say stuff like that, especially when I don't even know anything about the person that I'm playing like against. And it's like if you are actually playing against somebody who is gay and then you call them a slur that they identify with, that's just going to hurt them all the more. And but that's, I don't know if that's more so like the fan base or just like competitive scenes in general.
I feel like in a lot of ways like I don't I feel like COD lobbies are like the classic,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, the classic hellscape of gaming. like, like I feel like that's the last place I'd ever want to be, And I can't play first person shooters just because I have like some weird eyesight thing that I get very motion sick playing first person shooters, so I never really tried to. And I just, yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it also enables the opportunity to be communicating with a larger group of people, whereas like a lot of games like Life is Strange or Fire Emblem or Hades are single player games where you can like stream them, sure, but you're not playing online with other people while you're like doing the thing. So like there's no real chance for people to really comment on them in like a for like you to consume how other people are commenting on it unless you go out and look for it yourself.
Definitely. My like gamer origin story was like sitting with my brother while he was playing Call of Duty. And it's a miracle that I can like still game and be like a decent human being. But I guess like this one, once again bringing it back to Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem Fates, the title before like the most recent Three Houses title, like the most like anti-LGBT game in terms of like romances and things like that. So the game, like it has like three different branches necessarily. So like kind of three different games, but like I'll just say Fates for like the overarching game. Where like basically the player character has like grown up with this one family, but it actually turns out that it isn't their family, and they can either like go to their birth family or the one they've just known for their whole lives, or choose neither of them. And that game, not only can you like marry people who you think like were your siblings or like are your siblings. It turns out that like none of them are actually blood related to at all, but the player character has that idea in their head that like this is the family who raised me, I can marry them, and this is the family who I actually think I'm blood related to, but they're not, spoilers. And you can also marry your cousin who's like actually like blood related to you, like actual first cousin. And
oh no.
Royal family.
Royal family indeed. And there's also and there's only like one like LGBT support option for like the male and female player character respectfully, and both of them like don't have the best backstories. So it's like, yeah, these people can be gay, but they're also just like very seedy people who have had an interesting like negative life before like joining this part in your game. There's another localization. So there's this one character who is like very, very, very clearly lesbian. Like she has lines in the game that's like, I love women, they're so beautiful, I love looking at them. And so it's a different like support between like the male and female main character, but if you're playing with the male character, they have a conversation, and the male character is like, I'm gonna give you this potion and it'll make you see every girl as a man so you can be attracted to men. And it doesn't get more anti-gay than that. And that was, I'm not sure if that was in like the Japanese version or and if they changed it, but I'm pretty sure like at least in one version of the game that's a thing. And it's like, I mean, it's one thing to have a character who's also like child coded as well, like not 18 plus, a minor, yeah.
Not child coded, actually a minor.
Actually a minor, who's like, I am just so obsessed with women, and like is asking women out on dates, and Nintendo is like, we're gonna have a conversation where she's given a potion so every woman is a man and she can attract the right people. You could just not make the character be that way and that would be fine. But to set up the character to be a certain way and then put that there, that's incredibly anti-gay.
So are the developers who make the video games very popular, or is it the company that's more popular? For example, like Kevin Feige is really popular for making Marvel, but not all producers are well known for making movies.
I feel like it depends a little bit kind of on the game and on the franchise, because Tetsuya Nomura, the creator of Final Fantasy VII, like I feel like if you walked into like a like Comic-Con and like said that name, people would be like, yeah, like let's go. But I feel like indie developers, like people know who indie developers are, but I feel like the bigger you get, I don't know. I feel like it's a weird mix.
Yes.
Games, certain it depends on the popularity of the game. Like certain games, you know who made them. But if it's just a game from a big company, you know the company.
Yeah, like it depends. Like I think Neil Druckmann, who directed both Last of Us games and the fourth Uncharted game, is kind of like as it's sort of like a household name kinda for that. And same with Cory Barlog, who did the recent God of War. But when I think of like one person making a video game who's like huge, I always think of Hideo Kojima, who created the Metal Gear series and Metal Gear Solid, and recently Death Stranding, because I think he might be the only like person making games who can, like recently Death Stranding, sell like a bizarre huge budget game that will sell a lot of copies and
Has like a
totally,
bunch of like huge, like Norman Reedus, Guillermo
yeah.
del Toro's in that game. I
And
was like, okay, jump scare.
the game is like, the point of it is games don't have to be fun. Like I think he's the only person who could sell a game like that with his name on the cover, because every Hideo Kojima game except Metal Gear Solid 5, but that's a whole thing, his name is like on the cover of the game, and I can't think of any other developers who like their name would just be on the box for like
It's like think of like directors. I feel like huge directors, like Wes Anderson, I guess, Christopher Nolan, like people that will go see a movie because of the director. That's like how some games are.
yeah.
Like it's
Yoko Taro's like that too, kind of.
that's like the what draws you to it. You
I
play
think
it just because of that. Yeah.
I think that Toby Fox is also, he's become one of those names because so many people like Undertale became huge, and with that, Toby Fox just like his fame like skyrocketed now.
I also think it's just like how big the game is. Like Toby Fox, like he was basically like Mr. Undertale. I think like, correct me if I'm wrong, like he like did that himself, pretty much, or like nearly
Yeah.
himself. And like someone like Dan Salvato, I think his name is, he made Doki Doki Literature Club, like he did that pretty much himself. So definitely going back to that whole like indie thing, I feel like you recognize the names more if they're like bigger indie games or just like the household names that were already brought up. But like otherwise I feel like it's just like the companies in general.
I think also to understand like Undertale, you have to understand like the absolute chokehold that game had on like 2012 to 2014 Tumblr kids.
Oh, I mean, if you want to talk about like LGBT like plus relationships in media, like Tumblr is such a huge part of that too.
Yeah, I agree.
Like it's such like a weird. Tumblr has like its own culture, and at this point, TikTok as well.
Tumblr's impact definitely, like I feel like characters could be just minorly, they could have one interaction together and Tumblr is like, that's the one true pairing, like that
I
is what the
I
game's
think
about.
I do think also like you have to talk about like the lens that like queer people will experience games through as opposed like because everyone experience I was thinking about this today because I was thinking about this interview while I was at the gym and I was like you can't like just talk about a game objectively because everyone's experiences in their life reflect how they view like any piece of media, in this case gaming. Like I can look at a character and be like, oh my god, like I'm exactly like this character because of this, because I do this, so that means that they do this because I do this, like all of this stuff. And so I think that that's another huge part of it is like, yeah, canonical representation is important, but also just like the community that develops around the certain games and certain characters and shipping and fandom
Oh,
is a
shipping.
whole like toxic conversation that can happen in and of itself, but at the same time like I think it is important to like the queer community of like surrounding things like video games or movies or TV shows because like if there's not representation you got to make it yourself like right like but yeah so like I think that there's definitely like a toxic side of that, but I think that a lot of it is like coming together as like a community around something.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm more interested in talking about that than developers, unless, real quickly, all these popular developers, are there any LGBT creators that are very popular? Or does there seem to be a noticeable lack of representation in the development of games?
I mean, I think in general that's kind of like a huge issue. I'm actually doing a summer program right now that's based out of like this small like indie studio in Vermont called Rad Magpie, and basically their whole mission is to like help uplift underrepresented voices that are in the game development industry, because like I said before, so much was just marketed, especially like in America. So much of it was like just marketed to like straight white men.
Yeah.
And like I know that's kind of like a blanket statement kind of, but like, you know, like you go into like the local Target and literally everything is like everything in the boys like room decor section is like video games, and then you go to literally anywhere else and it's like not that. Then you actually look at the protagonists in these games themselves, and especially in bigger AAA games, you know, like they're kind of these like strong, heroic, suave men, and rarely are they men of color. And if they are, it's usually because of some sort of like occupation that they have. Like I don't know too much about like the Yakuza games, but you know, it makes sense for them to, you know, be Japanese, which they are. But unless it's something like that, for the most part, they're just like white dudes that just look like every generic Hollywood actor.
I think especially like games like Uncharted, which like I'm not saying they're bad games, but I feel like to me like Nathan is his name Nathan Drake is like kind of the epitome of that.
Earlier, we mentioned tournaments and lobbies that are like lobby tournaments and whatnot. So I just wanted to ask, like, what is the general like vibe of tournaments, and does sexuality matter to the viewers of these tournaments? Not necessarily the players, but the people who watch it too.
I mean, personally, like I've never competed in like a big tournament for gaming, but I feel like, I mean, I play like volleyball, so I play like I've been playing like a sport my whole life, and I feel like it's one of those things where it's like it sexuality like doesn't matter as long as you're good at what you do. Like right? Like it shouldn't matter. It's not like it's just like what you it's like it's not it has nothing to do with like the the thing that you're participating in at that time. Like anyone can be anything, but as long as they like get on the court or they sit down in the chair and they put on the headset, like as long as they're good at that, like that's like their credibility.
I will say, so I interned for a college varsity esports team, and I do know that like they do have rules against that stuff, because at the end of the day, you're not, if you're like if you're on an esports team, you know, you're representing the team. You're not just representing yourself, and especially when you're tied to a school, um, you know, stuff like that can be resulted in like, you know, being dismissed from the team or being suspended. So there are certain precautions, but I also don't really know how strictly that's enforced, especially now that in-person tournaments are starting up again. Um, but I'm going to one soon for my job, so I guess I'll see it there.
I feel like especially on like a collegiate level, like private tournaments could be like a totally different thing, but like collegiate level, if you're out there like representing your school, like this it is accountability not just on you, but it's also reflects the school. And so I feel like
Mhm.
that's like not just like a personal thing or like being like mean or rude or disrespectful. Like that could be like that could result in like serious issues for the school down the road if they like either condone it or there's no rules protecting against it.
Cool. And so now we can shift our lens to streamers because it has a much wider audience. I'd say it's a little more accessible to go on Twitch. And I'm sure there's other platforms if you would like to enlighten me. But, like, how is it handled there? Is it very common? Are there, like, certain creators you prefer because it's not as common to hear slurs, or not even just slurs, but, like, microaggressions against you or something like that?
Like kind of a mixed bag. Like we can have a conversation about like community guidelines and like how I think like Twitch is just like way too sensitive with them sometimes, but like I feel like when it really matters, Twitch is like silent, absolutely quiet, like no
Yeah.
back talk. Um and even with like with YouTube streaming as well, I feel like both are like have such rigid community guidelines, but I feel what I've heard, I never have like the attention span to watch Twitch streams live or like at all, but I've definitely heard that Twitch is just like a bit more sensitive with them. but also like if it really came down to it, like if it was like, I'd say likely if it was like a non-marginalized person or party saying something harmful to someone of like a marginalized party or group, like it probably like would be a ban or a suspension, but I think there would be like some kind of like time limit on it, I feel like.
Yeah, I also feel like along with that, like people go to the streamers that attract them. Like it is I think once I have logged onto Twitch and clicked on a random stream and Jack and I watched some like Finnish guy play Tetris for 30 minutes. And he was really good. He was really good at Tetris. We were like one of 3 people watching it. Um but I feel like people go to the streamers that they feel like either represent them or cater to the content that they wish to consume. So I don't know necessarily like on people who like maybe I don't I don't know exactly how to say like I feel like do you understand what I'm trying to say? It's like I feel like I don't know how the audience for someone who might not necessarily like hold themselves accountable with either using like slurs or like derogatory language, like if their audience would hold them accountable um in comparison to someone who attracts the kind of audience that would hold them accountable.
I think it also just kind of depends on like how much they've broken into the mainstream as well, because then like you're going to gather more people who won't necessarily understand the consequences of what you know this person said or did, and like the implications of it and the gravity of it, and so they're more willing to defend them. um Whereas I feel like if people have like a smaller following, they're also less likely to be put on that same pedestal, because there's almost like that air of like more of like that air of like intimacy, unless they have like a weird cult following, which I feel like can probably also happen.
I feel like especially right now, like I don't know anything about Dream SMT like at all, but the fan base for that human being terrifies me
They're insane.
in a way that I will never be able to quite put into words.
That's also another thing. I feel like the younger the fan base is, the more likely they're willing to defend problematic behavior, because very strong lack of critical thinking skills. Almost anything that's seen on like that Tumblr dashboard for like middle schoolers and early high schoolers, whether it's anime, video games, they are going to defend it with their life.
I definitely think about that a lot now is because kids are on the internet at like such a young age, and so they're gaming way younger than they used to, and like that's not to say that there aren't games that are targeted towards a younger audience, because there definitely are, but they're playing games that are meant for like for like people who are like in their late teens, early 20s at like such a young like age, and they have access to like other people's impressions of that game. Like I was playing, like I don't know what the target age for Jack and Daxter is. I don't know if any of you guys know that game. I was playing that when I was like a kid, but I had no exposure to like anyone else's like interactions with that game because I was, I don't know, 8 and had an iPod shuffle and that was it, and a PS2, right? Like I feel like it's such a different, they're so different from just like the way that like we interacted with media, especially at their age.
I actually want to take that and like zoom out and not just have like not just talk about LGBT representation and also like in the streaming how safe it is for people there, but just like in general, like how does streaming kind of unite the video game community, but how does it also kind of divide it too?
In that general space, I think it would be pretty safe. Other places where, like Lainey said, the like fan base is much younger, I don't think it's as safe, especially when they're watching older people. Like Lud's fan base is like teens and probably and like 20-year-olds. kind of thing, but Dream is 21 and he has 14-year-olds watching him play Minecraft.
We're all in our 20s, like in our early 20s. Like none of us are like that old. We're all young. We're younger than Dream. Like, but I'm like 14 being like, I don't know. Have any of you guys seen the show Mythic Quest? I know Jack has. I feel like he knows what I'm about to talk about. So there's a show called Mythic Quest, and it's about a game developing company. And the guy who's like in charge of business at the game developing company is obsessed with like finding the newest streamer, and they just keep getting like progressively younger. Like in the first season it's this guy called Pooty Shoe, and he's like 14, and then in season 2 they're like trying to get to the next best thing, and the kid is like, he's like 10 and he has like a massive following. And it's just like the like people keep getting famous younger and younger, like those kids who like play with toys on YouTube and do toy reviews, like it just blows my mind like how young people are on the internet, and then they're kind of put on like this pedestal where people consume their media in like who are either their age or like the same or like just younger than them. Like it makes me like my head spin.
Like young kids on TikTok,
No, Bill, please.
It freaks me out having young kids on TikTok because my For You page has had some stuff go by and I'm like, and I will look and they're like, I'm 14. Why is this on my For You page? And I'm like, why are you liking stuff on the algorithm to get it on your For You page? But like, there's like certain media should be like blocked off. There has to be some sort of something to block off 13-year-olds that shouldn't be seeing certain content. But at this, and I don't want to say it's necessarily an adult's job to worry about the kids on the app, but we still have to be considerate about the kids on the app. So there has to be a good balance. And it's really hard to find that balance when the kids keep getting younger and younger on certain apps.
Yeah, I mean, especially like since we've started our TikTok for Player One, like we had like 14, 15-year-olds like applying to the magazine and like joining our like forum, like our Discord, and it's like we had to make it like explicitly clear, and we're like, this is not a place that is moderated for minors. Like, yes, it's a public forum, but this like I'm I'm sorry, like this is a professional place. Like if it's not like a high school magazine, like it's startling to me. Like we had like a 13-year-old comment on one of our posts being like, let me know when they open applications again. I'm like, what?
Okay.
Like,
This was just like a funny thing to go off what Logan was saying a few minutes ago. And it kind of came back. When I was 12, I really like tried to be a famous Minecraft YouTuber. Like when I was like 12, like 12 proper. It was awesome. I wish I still had the videos because when I turned like 14, I was like really embarrassed of them and I deleted the YouTube channel. And then my hard drive, like, I don't know, like jumped off a cliff or something, and now I don't have any of it. But it was so cool. I would like, there would be like breaks in the videos where I'd like get up to like open the door for my mom or something. And like, but then I learned how to edit in iMovie, and I would use like the like this like the the thing at the start of an iMovie video with the red curtain, and it like says the name, and it'd be like Jokey Jack presents Skyblock episode 3, and it would like come to the side. I'd be like, "What's up, guys? Jokey Jack's here." Anyways, that was my fun little thing to add.
iCarly was the mold, but Hannah Montana started the whole like I'm your age and I'm famous, I'm more money than you ever will type beat. But definitely conversely of that, like there are also kids who just have like very minorly supervised access to the internet, and like there's this TikTok account I follow that's like definitely run by like 7-year-olds, and they just play with like fake food, and they just like make things, and there's so much like nice Velcro sounds and things like that. But like the people who are watching them and the people who like request them to make food are like actual adults. And if you take that to kids who just like have access to stream Minecraft and anyone can just like tell them anything, it definitely, like I think what someone was saying earlier is like it's not quite like an adult's job to make sure that like things are just like going okay. But I don't know, like kids can just like be told anything while they're building a little Minecraft palace.
So is
Yeah.
there any disclaimer whatsoever if like a public forum is not being monitored but also is not being restricted for minors, or is that something that people just need to figure out for themselves?
I
I mean,
definitely hope some places have it a bit clearer than we do.
I feel like it's very like because we before making the TikTok, we're very much like word of mouth, like Emerson College, Boston kind of area. We made the TikTok and now it's on like we made it explicitly clear everywhere that you can possibly access player one, like the Discord. You could possibly access the Discord like before you get the link, like you were prompted and say like this is a place that is 18 plus, like it is not moderated for minors, all the stuff. You have to agree to something before you join our Discord where that is the top thing. Like it was something like that I definitely just like forgot about or like just didn't consider and then suddenly became very aware of it. Like just over the top aware of it.
To us, like we just got out of being minors, and so it's like a weird consideration to consider that are people younger than us that there needs to be content restricted for. But do you feel like we talked about how it's not really an adult's problem? If like I joined a Discord server, it's not really my problem to make sure that all the minors here are safe. But should there be any restrictions enforced by the companies themselves?
I mean, there's already like ratings. And I know that I don't think that you can like get a rated M game unless you have a parent with you, or are 17 or older. So I mean, there is that.
If you're streaming a game that is rated M, does your stream automatically become like restricted, or is that still open to everyone? Minors can view the rated M games even if they can't buy it.
That's such a good question because I know on Twitch that you are able to like say what game you're streaming. So I feel like maybe if you specify that like before you start streaming, I have actually no idea.
I think part of it though is know your actual age on the internet unless you were an adult when you made your account on the internet. I think I'm 40 something on most websites. Like which I think is something to factor into. Like it's impossible to keep kids
Yeah.
out of things or shelter them from things. I was definitely watching like let's plays of rated M games when I was like 11 or 12 or whatever, just on YouTube.
I
Because
feel like
I'm in my
also
30s.
So I guess like we talked about internet safety, but do any of you have ideas about, I don't want to say internet safety one more time, but internet safety, like it is like right now you only have the option to have a public or private account, but say you're an account who wants to grow a fan base, but you want a mature fan base for the content you're making, like say you only play mature video games and you don't want minors, but you also don't want to be private. That's not how you grow a fan base. Like, is it just you have to accept that there are people going to see that?
I think so, because I think no matter what, even if like, you try to put a filter on, kids are still gonna lie about their age. Like, and I think that that issue is only going to like get worse because kids are becoming more tech savvy and more aware of what's going on around them because of their access to the internet. And like on top of that, so much of being a kid is like wanting to, it's like, wanting to get into those spaces like that, like that, like that you shouldn't be. Like for me, it was always like we had like a big cabinet of movies that of like DVDs, and there were some like adult comedies that when I was little, my parents would watch with my older brothers, but wouldn't allow me to watch with them. And of course, growing up, I like wanted to know, and there's that curiosity that to some point, you know, it does get a bit far, and then they are gonna lie about their age, probably.
Yeah, I think there's just I don't think there's any good solution. Like that's the part that's like frustrating is like we're like obviously like we're not creating content on any platform that is like inappropriate really by any means. Like like we're still definitely like a very public forum in a lot of ways, but it's just like we're talking about stuff that 20-year-olds talk about, like people who are in their 20s talk about, not stuff that 13 and 14-year-olds should be talking about. Like it's an interesting, it's very interesting to navigate sometimes, where it's like I'm like
Yeah, because then you'll have the ones that are like, oh, well, like, I'm mature for my age.
yeah, like, and I'm like I'm like, are you, or are you your age acting like you're mature for your age? Like I definitely, like, as
Yeah.
I've gotten older, like definitely when I was 13, I thought it was so like I don't know, like mature and like could handle myself perfectly. But as I've gotten older and like I interact with kids who are like 13, 14, 12, 13, 14 now, I'm like, you are 12 trying to act like you're 17. Like it's very clear to me.
At some
Yeah.
point, not gonna lie, it just gets like uncomfortable.
I know kids who are like 7 with the newest iPhone. I got the 4S at 13, and that was based off of a promise that I made to play my best in the next game. And anyway, like just kids growing up way too fast, and it doesn't make these spaces any better because well, and it's not like I wouldn't necessarily say it's us 20-year-olds that are causing kids to grow up so quickly, but like it's almost like they are trying to keep up with our generation just because we already had I don't know, we've seen a lot of the process happen, whereas they're already in a lot of the technology that's been developed.
Yeah.
Like going from cable to Netflix, like watching that happen, or going from the 4S to like, oh my gosh, you mentioned your iPod Shuffle. I had the iPod Mini that didn't even have a face.
Oh, the Nano?
Yes,
No.
that's what I grew up with. But kids are like, yeah, I have Spotify.
Like as a coach or as like a teacher, it's kind of like being a teacher where if someone tells you something, like you have to report it to your boss. And like usually kids will be like, "Oh, I have a boyfriend or I have a girlfriend." And it's like cute cuz they're like 9 and I'm like, "Oh, like what do you do? Like hold hands on the playground? Like that's so cute." Like I don't know. Like that's just like very sweet. And then like sometimes like they'll like say it and they'll be like they'll like look like they want to say something else and I'm like, legally, like if you tell me this, like I have to tell my boss. Like I don't, like if you like whatever you say. And sometimes they like say stuff and I'm like why are you on the internet at this age? Like why are you 9 years old and like on Snapchat? Like like I'm just like stuff like that where it's like I'm like be like telling my boss this stuff and I'm like I don't I don't get it. And that was the one thing, like I remember being like in 8th grade and being like pissed that my mom wouldn't let me have an Instagram. But now I under I shh, I understand it now. I get it. Guys, I get it.
If anyone has any other summary about this, I would appreciate it. And if anyone has any other topic for this interview they would like to cover real quick. Good news, my dog is back. Sorry, she just started sniffing at my door. I think this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for coming. Also, anyway, thank you all for watching.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.